Where's the Talal? I'm looking for Talal.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a wonderful day today. My name is Talal, and you're listening to the Popcorn and Soda Podcast, the show where we discuss all things movies, pop culture, and so much more. I want to thank each and every one of you for making me a small part of your day. On today's show, we're joined by a very special guest. You've seen him on projects such as The Missing, CSI, and most notably as his role as Vega in the pop culture classic Street Fighter. With the movie celebrating its 27th year anniversary, it continues to be a fan favorite for generation after generation. On the show today, the very talented Jay Tavare. How are you, Jay?
Well, good afternoon from Los Angeles. I am feeling great. It's a beautiful sunny day here. So we're blessed to have this weather at end of November.
Well, too bad I can't do the same. I'm here in Toronto, Canada, and we just had our first big snowfall of the day, of the entire year actually today. So I'm envious of you right now, Jay. I really am.
I'm sure.
Jay, how have you been over these last 18 months? We're living in such a crazy world, especially being a creative artist as yourself. What did the last 18 months look like for you?
Well, it's been fascinating because for me, any form of isolation of this magnitude remind me of like an ashram where you basically have to stay quiet and you have to go internal. And I made these last 18 months work for me only because I realized it was almost a form of encampment or imprisonment. So you had two choices. You could take that time and make it productive, or you could waste your time and get depressed. I used to joke with my friends. I said, we're going to come out of this a chunk, a hunk, a drunk, or a monk. So it depends which path you choose.
So that's actually, it's a good one. It's a good one. It's so true.
Yeah. So I decided, like, I created a routine for myself. I had a home gym, and luckily we are here in Southern California. So I was able to escape and go on a, social distancing hike or go to the beach with my little dog. And I managed to be productive in the sense of I did some work. I do voiceover work, and I worked on Masters of the Universe for Netflix last year, right here from my home studio. I played one of the characters' voices. And so I actually ended up doing a little bit of work, but it was challenging. It was very challenging. And I witnessed all the changes, not just to our world, but to our industry, as well as a lot of my friends freaking out and losing themselves. So it was definitely challenging, but I try to make it productive.
Yeah, and that's really good to hear. And it's really fascinating what you said about the internal deep dive you took. And I'm a big believer in that as well. These last 2 years have been a very difficult time for a lot of people in many different ways. But if you can even find one piece of solace or one thing that made you a better person in these last 2 years, I think that's great. Just as being a human being, having that time to internally dissect, your own faults, your own highs, your own lows. I think it's great that a lot of people took this time to be really productive about a lot of self-discovery and self-fulfillment.
You had no choice. You had to reflect. And I think whenever we are able to quieten down and look at life, then we actually see the deeper meanings. Because sometimes I feel like we're into this race and you're off and running. And before you know it, you're out of college. Now you got a job. Now you're working. Now you have a wife. Now you have a kid. Now you're paying taxes. Before you know it, you're 60 years old and you're thinking, wait a second, I'm retiring. And what did it all mean? Except I repeated this repetition for so long. So I think in these moments is when we really sense, what does it mean? I lost my father at the beginning of COVID. So it forces me to look at family issues again and think myself, I went and chased this impossible dream in Hollywood. And yes, I achieved success, but I had sacrificed a lot to gain that success, which is how life is. But whatever you want to gain, You have to realize you have to give something up if you want to gain what you're after. That's just part of the exchange in life. And the most expensive commodity is time. And when we're young, we don't realize that. But if I was going to tell your listeners anything, is don't sit for a single moment. If you have an idea, flush it out, go for it. If you have a passion, go for it. Do not wait till tomorrow. Don't keep saying, I'll do it next year, whatever, because now you see how next year may not be promised to anyone. So it's vital to go after your dreams and do what you love now.
Some deep words of wisdom from Jay Tavare himself. And before we go further, my condolences to you and your family. I know how difficult losing a loved one can be. But one thing you mentioned there, Jay, is I love what you said there about following your dreams and going after it every single day. People, we all look at the successful people in our lives or in the world, and we're like, oh, we can't accomplish this or we can't accomplish that. But the one thing we don't see is the years, decades of hard work that it took for those people to get to that spot. We're living in this society that we want everything now, and we want success now, we want money now. But as you mentioned, there's a lot of sacrifices we have to make in order to get to that spot. And I just love the way you phrased all that. Before we dive into your work, I always love to hear creative stories in their own words. You've had such a consistent career in this medium, whether it's in video games, TV shows, or movies. Jay, where does this all begin for you? What were some of your early influences? Ultimately, what made you want to be in the creative arts?
You know, when I was really young, and I mean in the first decade of my life, I noticed very quickly that I was, my gift was my kinetic skills. I always was more agile, more acrobatic than my friends. And that's why before I even started training gymnastics and martial art, I just noticed that my physical skills was one of my assets. And obviously when I saw Bruce Lee on screen at the young tender age, before he even made it, I watched him in movies like Big Boss, and because I lived in Europe and we had access to some of those Hong Kong movies. So I had Bruce in the late 60s, early 70s before he made it. So he had a tremendous impact on me. And I also followed his philosophy in life, you know, and that really, for me, I loved Bruce a lot, as much for his philosophy of life as his obviously physical assets. And many of the things he said had an impact on me at a young age. And I just feel like I had that tenacity, that drive, and I knew entertainment was a field I loved, because my first experience with applause and audience was in sport arenas. Well, I noticed when I won a race or when I performed exceptionally well in competition, the cheer of the crowd, the excitement that would come out of that would just make me want to try harder and be better. So I realized there was a real bug there, but I didn't really flush it out, because like I remember being at school and we had a career advisor come, and his opening sentence was, who wants to be James Bond? Who wants to be an astronaut? Who wants to be a Hollywood movie star? And all the hands went up. Then he says, okay, now let's put our hands down. Let's discuss jobs you actually can get. So his opening speech was like, shoot my dream down. I was like, who the hell is this guy? But that's how surreal being a movie star was like, movie star was compared to being James Bond and an astronaut. It was like an impossible dream. And to this day, most people have no clue what you do to become an actor in Hollywood. Even nowadays, with all the information out there, it's because there really are no rules. That's what you learn as you go. The good news is there's no rules. The bad news is there's no rules. So there's no blueprint you can't follow what Al Pacino did and achieve his success, or Robert De Niro, or Tom Cruise. Each one of those three men did something different before they made it, before they, as we say in Hollywood, popped or cracked the layer. So it's unique for his individuals. And for me, was equal amount ignorance of the challenges ahead, as well as that will and determination to just go after what I really wanted, with just no surrendering, no backing down. And to some extent now I realize part of my success comes down to one element. An element was not in my hand: luck, which is something nobody talks about. You can have all the talent in the world. You can be even in the right movie at the right time. But if that movie gets released and it flops, or for whatever reason, there's a major global catastrophe, that movie no longer has the same meaning or sense. Well, now you've lost your momentum. So that luck, the luck of the draw, to be in the right place at the right time. And for me, Vega was like my first big movie. So it was the right movie, the right role in the early 1990s. And I had been already working at it for half a decade, but it was just, I was ready. It was like that saying, there's no such thing as luck. Luck is preparation and opportunity when they meet. But you got to be prepared when opportunity arrives. So, and that was always at the back of my mind, that the time is limited. I need to be as ready as possible. So when I get the shot, I'm going to shine. There's no wait till I lose weight, wait till I get ready, wait till I learn martial arts. No, I want to be ready. You give me the shot, I'm there. And that's how I approached my career, I guess, in a way.
Jay, the entertainment industry is such a roller coaster where, especially in the arts, you can have the highs of the highs and the lows of the lows. Now, as someone who's been in the industry for decades, what did you find the trajectory of your career was when you first started, those first 5-10 years? Did you have the high, then the low, then the loop in the middle? What was that like for you personally?
Well, just like I said, I started unusually. Like my first role was a starring role in a big martial art blockbuster. So that normally doesn't happen. Like Johnny Depp's first role was in
Was it Nightmare on Elm Street, I think?
Exactly, but number 10 or number 8. He had a small scene where he dies in bed with the television or something. But I'm just saying, Matthew McConaughey was in Texas Chainsaw Massacre number 4. So mine was not like that. I got lucky. I got a starring role. But just to put it into perspective, the 4 names that were up for Vega was Antonio Banderas, Antonio Zapata Jr., and Isai Morales and Jay Tavare. So I was up against some major names, although at the time, Antonio Banderas and Antonio Zapata Jr. were relatively unknown. Banderas had just done one American movie, Mambo Kings, and he could hardly speak English. And the only one, the most famous one, was Isai Morales with the most fame. But out of all of them, physically and visually, I was more like Vega, which I think really helped me land the part, because they were looking for the physical skill sets for that too. So, but after Vega, I landed also within 6 months of that, I landed a movie that I played a Middle Eastern terrorist, sadly, on an executive decision. And it was a big movie. It was a movie that went on to this day. That movie plays nonstop because the storyline was pretty much 9/11, before 9/11. I mean, they literally, like, there was a discussion that did they watch this movie before they got those ideas? Because the whole concept was the plane is a missile and they're going to crash it into Washington. So I wonder where they got that idea from. But yeah, I had 1 or 2 or 3 roles. Then things quietened down. Then I started to do some native roles, and which wasn't something I had planned. And so I went in a different direction. I mean, my goal was to be an action star when I started. I thought I was going to be the next Jean-Claude, the next Van Damme. I wanted to be an action star. I wanted to be like Jason Statham for, if I was going to pick a career. But as destiny have it, I went in a different direction, not because I chose to, but because it's where my career took me. I did a small independent movie called Unbowed. It won the best actor for me at an American Indian Film Festival and the best picture. And then I started to get considered for some indigenous roles. And before I knew it, I was cast in adaptation opposite Meryl Streep. And really, that was the most pivotal movie in my career, because being across the screen with Meryl Streep, even for a few minutes, it's like the magic wand. And Spike Jonze, who was our Oscar-winning director, was kind enough to put my name at the beginning of the movie with 9 other names or 8 other names that were literally 7 of them had Oscars. So that was like a way of, he validated me. And I always say this to young actors. Part of acting is you work on your skills and you do what you can, but what the industry gives you. Like if you get into an A-list Hollywood movie that goes on to win both a critical acclaim as well as make gazillion dollars, then your value goes up. You're like a commodity. And by landing a movie like Adaptation and being across the screen with Meryl Streep and Nicolas Cage and Tilda Swinton and Chris Cooper, who won the Oscar for that role, did more for me than the decade prior that I'd been busting my cojones trying to get somewhere. So it's those shifts and sparks you look for in life. And again, it's not in your hands, but landing the role in Adaptation. And prior to that, I'd done a bunch of movies. I was getting work, but not the kind of work I really was hoping for. So an Adaptation established me as a thespian in Hollywood and took me in a direction of being more of a serious actor. And after that, I ended up working with Anthony Minghella on Cold Mountain with Jude Law, Nicole Kidman, Renee Zellweger. Then I landed The Missing for Ron Howard, worked with Kate Blanchett, Tommy Lee Jones, and Val Kilmer. So it was a great run that followed Adaptation. And then I worked for Steven Spielberg in Into the West, that I worked with Kerry Russell, and it was a mini series. So that run between 2000 and 2006, I would say, was probably my most stellar period. And it ended with working on Pathfinder for 20th Century Fox as one of the lead roles opposite Carl Urban and Clancy Brown and Moon Bloodgood. So, but things then slowed down. Then you had the big writer's strike and recession, and everything just suddenly died around 2008, and everything changed. So you're absolutely right. We always talk about having a good run in our business, because when you get the baton, you go for it.
You have to.
You know, you don't stop till someone trips you, or till you fall, or till you have to hand the baton. Otherwise, that baton is, you better run, boy. Run like Forrest Gump.
Okay, let's deep dive into one of your most beloved roles, and we just spoke about that. It's this Vega in Street Fighter. This is one of those movies that's truly such a fan favorite. Capcom took the video game, which was this massive arcade juggernaut, and adapted it to the big screen. The film embraces what it is, and then it takes it even further. I'm a big fan of your role as Vega, especially because he was one of my favorite characters. So before you got that role, oh, my pleasure. Were you a fan of the games? Did you know of the property before going for the audition?
I was aware of the game, but I had no idea of its popularity. And I'm known for like doing extensive research on my characters. That's like part of what I enjoy about my craft, is that when I get a role, whether I'm playing a Cherokee in 1860s or a Spaniard who is a matador who's now street fighting like Vega, I try to go I literally met with matadors. I learned matador techniques. Then I try to incorporate those techniques into the martial art, because although Vega had a fighting technique, when I got to the set, I realized when they gave me a real steel mask, which is back there, and the claw, which I only got literally days before the shoot because they were still building it, and it was heavy and clunky. And the first thing I did was I put a hinge on it because I realized I couldn't move my wrist and I was going to break my wrist fighting like that. So I asked them to put a hinge there so I could at least manipulate. I literally had to create a fighting style that didn't exist. I mean, yeah, it existed in a cartoon character, but once you actually have a 12-inch claw and a mask on that you only have to breathe through these eyelids up here, it's a whole different ballgame than the reality of, like, just like people who watch MMA, they always say, come on, hit him. Why isn't he fighting back? Well, I got news for you. It's like Michael Tyson says, everyone has a game plan till you get punched in the face. Yeah. And in a battle contest is like maintaining your oxygen levels, not getting tired, breathing through a mask that you don't literally, you're hyperventilating, and then being acrobatic and whatever. It was a whole different level of challenges that you never know watching the movie. But that's what I learned as I got thrown in the mix. It was like, I mean, it was literally my first big trim movie. So I was just as excited as I was nervous, and I wanted to get it right. And I then went into the arcades and I talked to the kids, but no, I wasn't super aware of it. But once I got it, once I knew I landed the role, because it was months before the movie was going to start. We started martial art training with Benny Urquidez, Benny the Jet, who's a legend in the martial art community. And he was voted the greatest full contact fighter of all time by Black Belt magazine before UFC was invented. I mean, this man for 27 years was undefeated, and he had, I think, 63 world title bouts with 57 knockouts, and he never lost. So he was an incredible guy. And he had demanded the moment you got the cast, I want him. So since I was one of the first street fighters to got cast in the first group, we got handed over to the Jet Center here, which was a very famous martial art academy. And he started to work with us 2.5 months before the movie began. So we were like training 5 days a week, like full on martial art training with world champions. And Benny had his whole system of preparing us for these characters. And in that period was when I started going to the arcades and reading everything I could and talking to fans of Vega. And I realized in order for me to get this right, I need to put his special moves in the game, in the movie, whenever I can find to put some of that personality in there. And then I took it very seriously. I wanted to look the part. And, Vega was described as brutally muscled with a matinee idol looks. So it was like, there was not much to go with. It's like, okay, that's it. That's the description, So it was like creating this three-dimensional character out of this cartoon strips and little game. But I realized how important it was to get it right, because the kids who played it were fanatical. And they knew everything about Vega, his height when he was born, when he was grew up. He was in Madrid, he did this, then he was, So I realized you can't get it wrong. You've got to, these kids are waiting for you to nail it. And I think one of the reasons Vega has lasted almost 30 years later, it's still, when I talk to people, Vega has become such an endearing character. It's because I feel like I nailed what these childhood imagination was looking for, I feel like I put something on film. And honestly, most of my work didn't make the final cut, which is a tragedy, because I have done some incredible martial art fight scenes. And only now I realize, having talked to our director, Steven D'Souza, that he was under tremendous pressure from the censorship board. And since it was the first big martial art game being made into the movie, they were literally on him like you would not believe. They were like, he couldn't have bone cracking noise. He couldn't have a drop of blood.
Wow.
He couldn't have any kind of violence. Plus he was trying to make the movie a PG-13, which was in itself challenging with a movie called Street Fighter. So it was one of those choices he made, not necessarily, Mortal Kombat managed to put a lot more grotesque violence, and it ended up grossing a lot more than us initially. But I think now, 28 years later, Street Fighter has gone to become a pop culture film. So all credit to our visionary director, Steven D'Souza, that made a movie that at the time people may have said, what is that? It's not this and that, the other, but it withstood the test of time. And now it's like a pop cult feel-good movie that people watch it again and again, like was it Rocky Horror Picture, where they dress up as the characters. And, I see Street Fighter becoming like that, where you eventually dress up and go and watch this corny movie.
Well, hey, you know what? Let's dive into the production of this film, because there's so many stories about the behind-the-scenes filming of this movie, whether it's in Australia or Thailand. Speak from your perspective. Can you talk about the shoot of the movie?
We shot it 3 countries. What was your question?
Can you speak about the shoot of this film? And I'm not going to ask you to confirm or deny any of the urban myths about the movie, but just from your experience, what was that like? Especially as you mentioned, it was your first big movie. You were taking it very serious, but around your surroundings.
We literally had everything in the movie. We had Raul Julia, which was a legendary stage, cinema, theater legend. We had Kylie Minogue, a world-level pop star. We had a out-of-control movie star like Jean-Claude, which was at the height of his career and could not be controlled, and was now clearly is in open. So we're not talking about something that's not known. Was on drugs. I mean, he was like literally he did the whole movie high. So it was a very challenging thing for the producers to keep everything in line. And then we were also in foreign countries with different laws. And we had to, going from Thailand to Australia, one of the street fighters got stopped in the airport because he was coming in with a suitcase worth of drugs. It was just crazy stories all the way through, in the production. And not to mention the challenges. I mean, the day we shot the scene where I'm in the cage and I have to dive out, Entertainment Tonight was there. And we only had 2 versions of that cage that was built to collapse.
Yeah.
And the idea was Jean-Claude is going to come through a wall with a real tank, not a fake tank. A real tank was coming through the wall and it was going to crush the stage. And that was the day they realized they could not double me. And that was the birth of Jay Tavare becoming like Jackie Chan. And ever since that day, I've done all my stunts in my movies. Again, not something I chose to, but because it was such a ridiculous physical shape. I was like down to 2 or 3% body fat. And there was not a single stuntman who looked like me naked. So they couldn't get someone, and Vega had no top on. So it's like you couldn't get Joey to play me because he didn't look like Jay, So they said, hey, he's got to do his own stunts. And then my second thought was the producers on Street Fighter were the same producers who had just done The Crow. And they managed, on Crow, they managed to kill Brandon Lee. And Brandon Lee was a friend of mine. So my thoughts in the back of my head was, okay, Brandon died on The Crow. And those thoughts were at the back of my mind. But we did have an amazing team around us, so I was confident. We had Benny the Jet, we had Charlie Pacerni as our stunt coordinator and second unit director, who comes from a legendary family of Italian stuntmen, tough as nails, and I remember, anyway, when they decided I was going to do my own stunt, and it was a collapsible stage, and I'm in there, the tank is going to come through to crush that stage. On the first take, all the Thai extras were not told to scatter on time. They almost got run over by the tank. So they stopped it just on time. And on the second take, I remember I said to Charlie, I says, any advice before the thing? He goes, yeah, watch you don't get killed, son. So I never forget that advice. Watch you don't get killed, literally was his advice to me. And that tank came through that wall. I still remember the sound. And I remember they wanted me to move the moment I heard the sound, but I thought, no, I'm going to wait just a moment longer because I was so amped. And I remember I ran and they had taped the ground where I had to run, because if you ran out of that, it would collapse through the stage. But they would take the tape off before the take. So you had to memorize your path out. And I put Vega's dive, when he dives out of the ring, across the ring, I put that dive in that moment. But the irony was where the production had their cameras, did not see the length of that dive. I flew like 15 feet. I was so amped. But Entertainment Tonight, if you can ever find that footage, got the full jump at how far I traveled with that dive, which was ridiculous. I was so amped that I flew out of there and it looked like I'm on wires, but honestly, it was no wire work in that movie. Everything you see was real. And in fact, that's something else I was going to say. I recently bumped into Byron Mann, who played Ryu, and we reminded each other that all the fight scenes you see with Byron is full contact. We were really hitting each other, everything except the face. Every punch, every kick you see, when you hear that sound, that's not special effect. Byron was not a martial artist. He learned as he went, but only way he knew to make it real was to throw the kick. And for us, and Benny wanted that. Benny wanted us to, like, if you make an impact, he wanted us to like pull the punches, but actually make the impact and pretend we have an egg in our hand. So the idea was as much realism, like that movie, when you see the fights, they were as close to real martial arts fighting as you're going to see, because the techniques were all real. Most of the contacts of the wrestling or the grappling or the punches was actually making contact, minus the headshots, obviously. But it was like all of us had bruises and pain during the shoot in that, because it was pretty close to reality.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating you bring that up, especially that great scene with you and Byron Mann at the very end of the movie. But one thing that I really, again, I've seen this movie probably 1,000 times growing up, and I recently
Mhm.
revisited it. And it's funny you bring that up about the jump out of the cage, because I watched that and I'm like, this man's diving out far. You can see it. You
I
can tell
wish
there's no
you could see the
wires.
entertainment tonight. When I say there was a ceiling fan, because it was in a warehouse in Bangkok, there was a ceiling fan hanging about 10 feet out of the cage. And I asked them to tape it out of the way. And the stunt coordinator, Charlie, says, look at this kid. That's 15 feet away. What do you think? You're gonna go out there? What do you think? You're like a long jump champ? He's making fun of me. I said, no, it's just in my way, and I'm gonna go far. I don't want to hit it. And he was laughing at me. I passed the fan. I went past the fan. They could not believe how far I traveled. In fact, when they watched the take, the stuntman who was doubling Ryu, because he had a stuntman, and that guy just bumped into the door and jumps out. It
Mhm.
looks so insignificant compared to my dive. The director goes, "Why didn't you get him to do something more crazy? Because he's the star. Ryu's the star. I'm the
Right.
villain." But the villain looked more exciting
Looks
than
more
the star.
badass than the star. Yeah, it's so true.
So he was. But throughout the film, they realized that I was bringing a different level of craft and talent to
Mhm.
the role. I was like, whatever Benny could throw at me, I could do. I was doing all my own stunts, and as a shame that fight at the end, there was moments that
It was cut short. It looks like.
it was so good. And you got to remember, we took Ernie Ray Sr. Ernie Ray Sr. is a legend in Taekwondo world. If you Google him, he's the head of the West Coast Taekwondo team out of San Francisco area, Bay Area. And he's a legend. His son is also like a director and actor now, Ernie Ray Jr. Ernie Ray. So Ernie Ray was the man I was fighting at the end. It was Byron and Ernie. And we were going back and forth. Byron was doing most of his own stuff too. But when you got really serious, I was fighting Ernie Ray, and we had a full contact fight as Vega and Ryu. I am so mad they didn't leave in there, because there was moments where I hit him, then I jump on the bench, then I do a somersault, I land next to him, I elbow him. It was just so, without any wires, so risky. I was in a mask and a claw, nailing my back somersault right in a small space. I took major risks. And it's just so, they just released a new version of Street Fighter this Christmas. It's a metal box set. They still didn't put it in. And I said, what's the point? I said to the director, I said, why couldn't you guys release an unrated version of Street Fighter? Because that would make a lot of money now. Put all the stuff we did, put all the fights back in, all money that would make, instead of adding scenes that nobody really cares. Everyone wants to see the fights. Everyone wants to see the battles. Put that stuff in there. And unfortunately, nobody's done it. I don't even know if that footage survived, or is it in some vault in Universal Studios. But somebody should do an unrated version of Street Fighter and put the stuff we did, just the stuff we shot, because it really was a whole different level of fighting and stuff. And none of it made the final cut because of the PG-13, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, because when you watch the movie, and me watching it in different phases of my life, and I'm 8 years old, 20 years old, 25 years old, it's different when you kind of see different perspectives of it. And one thing that I find now is that the conversation we're having, I feel like there's the fight scenes, especially with Vega and Ryu, and even some of the Guile and Bison, I feel like they're always a minute cut too short. I feel like there's always more. There's a bit more of a punch you can throw in, or a bit more of the fight prolonging. And it kind of makes sense the more we talk about this, that the studio was under such a big pressure to have just, I guess, a limited amount of fighting in there, which is kind of a shame, especially if you're going to do a re-release of it. This movie is much bigger today than it was when it first came out. So why not dive into that specific pop culture zeitgeist that it's built, where people want more of this movie? So I think that's a missed opportunity, right?
It really is. The humor is great, because Steven D'Souza is a very funny guy, and his humor is apparent in all the movies he's done, like Die Hard, Running Man, Commando, mean, this guy was a legend in the 1980s. What people must realize, he had written the biggest action movies of all time in that period. So when he got the chance to write Street Fighter, he decided to direct it, you know, because he was chosen first to just write it. Then he wanted to write and direct. So it was his first directorial debut, which then he had the challenge of getting the ratings. So he had a lot of restrictions on him, unfortunately. I wish, like, imagine doing Street Fighter now with the same cast and with the freedom. I'm sure it would have been an entirely different movie, you know. So, and but for what it is, it's become part of history, and we can only wonder where that footage is. And who knows, maybe one day someone will dig it up and surprise everyone with an unrated version. But if they didn't do it now with the box set, I mean, I was so disappointed when he said we're doing a special edition. I was like, tell me you're going to put this footage in there, you know, if that even survived. But it is what it is now, unfortunately. So it only exists in interviews like this where I can tell you, believe me, the scenes would hold up against some of the new films you see. Because we had everyone. We had Benny the Jet. We had Charlie Pacerni. We had incredible training. We had the talent. And I did the work. I mean, it's like, I just wish there was in there just for me when I'm a granddad to say, look at me. You know?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but again, as you mentioned, it is what it is, and I guess we can just enjoy the movie for what we got. And
there are so many movies. It's like, what if Bruce Lee had lived? The movies that he would have made. You know, we can always only imagine what would have been. I mean, this is the
even Brandon, right? You mentioned he was a friend of yours. Like, if that tragic accident happened, that guy had it all: the looks, the chops, the martial arts. That guy could have been such a massive star.
I mean, literally, that movie made him an international celebrity. That's how sad it is. Just like his father, he died with the movie that made him a star. I mean, it's so weird and parallel, and they mirrored each other. It's just mind-boggling how. That's why I believe some of the conspiracies sometimes, because it was such a freaky accident. It wasn't like what just happened on the set with Alec Baldwin, which was a real bullet, real gun. In his case, was not real bullet. You know, it was something jammed in there, and the quarter charge made that thing that was jammed in the nozzle become a live round. And so when the guy fired the dummy round, the explosion made that piece that was stuck in the barrel become a projectile. One shot hit him right there, went and got stuck in his spine. He was 6 hours in surgery and died that night. I mean, it's 28 years old. It's the biggest crime ever, really. It's, when I think of Hollywood in the last 50 years, that's only happened 3 times. Imagine, 3 times. That's how, of all these billions of rounds that gets fired, 3 times. And the third one was just this year with Alec Baldwin's carelessness. Otherwise, the only other time before Brandon was a television show where the guy, it was a series called Cover Up. And he was a really good looking actor as well. And he was just playing Russian roulette with the guns on the set. And there was a dummy round. It was again a dummy round. But that's why I tell people, dummy rounds still have an explosive charge. It's just quarter charge or half charge. And he fired that dummy round, and there was enough pressure in his temple that killed him. So it's just so rare. It's so rare, and it's so sad. It's like, those are the moments you really believe maybe there is destiny in life, you know? You land this job, you go in direction, you don't do that job, you become a completely different type of actor. Like, as I said, I never thought I would go and become such a serious actor that I am now and really follow the thespian end of the thing. And then to have that set of skills always comes handy, you know? Like on Cold Mountain, my director, Anthony Minghella, once he realized I was as good as any stuntman he had on the set, then he realized, oh my God, I can have him climb the church himself. He's going to do this. He's going to jump in the pit. He had me do lots of crazy stuff once he had that trust in me. So my directors always tend to be excited when they realize the actor can do this for real. He can do the behavior of the character without bringing his stuntman. He can ride the horse or use a bow and arrow or really jump out of a window. You know, and for me, those are the fun parts, you know?
Well, that's so true. And it kind of goes, Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about at the very start, is if you have a skill or if you have a talent, you can't get ready for tomorrow. You gotta get ready for now. And I think that's one of, dialing back to Street Fighter specifically, is you could tell, like, you were like, of course all these other actors were in great physical shape, but with a lot of your, again, I think it's a tragedy that we couldn't see more of the fights, especially in that
Yeah.
cage. I so wish there was actual, like, could you imagine if there was actual a full fight between you and Byron Mans Ryu in that cage?
In the cage.
Yeah, could you imagine that?
They hardly use the cage. I mean, that's the whole movie. The whole game is about cage fighting, and there was 2 scenes in the cage. Me fight. By the way, the guy I fight at the beginning with the machete.
Yeah.
I have to tell you a story because he just passed away last year.
Ah.
And one of his family members wrote to me. I forgot his name now, which I feel bad because he had 2 names. He was a legend in Bangkok. He was one of the most incredible kickboxers, champions. He had won for many years, and he was like a grand champion. So when he came to the set that day, I noticed all the extras were like, cop, you know, they were like in awe of this guy. And I didn't know who he was. And he came with the machete, started doing his face or whatever. And every time I was like clawing him, he would go down and smack his face, like when I mean, as hard as that against the ground on every take, because he was supposed to drop like a boom, like no fear, face plant on every take. That's when I realized this guy is a real warrior. Like, he's the real deal. He's not like some actor they hired. And the extras started telling me who he is. And it was so like sweet. It was like his first scene in a movie with Vega. And he was more important than anybody else on the set to the extras. Everybody was in awe of him. So, but we had a fight scene. You know, we actually had a fight scene before they cut it into that whole thing, you know. He's in a machete, I'm in the claw. And I did some crazy stuff. And it was like the first time they were trying to see how to capture the fight scenes, you know, because as you know, like there's one thing to have the talent, but capturing a fight scene, how the camera works, now that I understand it after 40 years of being in the business, when you have people who can really fight, you want to go wide so you can see what they're doing. When the actors don't know what you do, like many movies, what do? They go really tight. It's like, it's here. It's here.
Yeah. And the camera shaking and this and that. Yeah.
You know, exactly. The guy's punching here. You know, like you don't see what's going on. Well, when the guy got skill sets, that's when you're back, you go, boom, the punch is there. Boom, the block is there. So you actually see the guy weaving or moving. So it really depends on the actors, you know, and I like movies where, like, that's why Hong Kong action or Chinese action sometimes is so superior, because the actors really are doing the moves, where we are not doing that in America too. After Matrix and Keanu's success, they have to. We almost have to do your own. The audience demands it. So there's they're more sophisticated. They demand you, and plus every little kid has done enough martial arts to know if that sidekick was really correct or you just faking it, you know?
Oh yeah, that's so true. And like, you know what, there's so many things that make this movie special. Again, we talked about the comedy of it, we talked about the action of it, the storyline of it, the campiness of it. It really embraces everything that it is. And someone like Andrew Brzezinski, who plays Zangief in the movie, that guy just crushed it. And that's one of the few things that I take out from this movie, that there's so many different elements that you can find that are so, I don't want to say so bad, but they're so good, but they're so good. They're just so good. And now with the movie celebrating its 27th year anniversary, Jay, how often do you get people coming up to you saying they just watched this movie for the first time?
I mean, honestly, to this day, when I go on a red carpet, I'll give you an example. I was on a red carpet a few years ago, and the guy wanted to know how to announce me. I said, well, I've been in Cold Mountain, The Missing, Adaptation, Into the West. I was mentioning all these big
Pathfinder,
projects.
yeah.
He was like, I don't know that. What? Which one? He said, kid, you got anything I know? I was like, I was Vega in Street Fighter. He goes, now we're talking. So he literally, like, I was like, wait a sec. I just mentioned 3 Oscar-winning movies. Those don't matter. He goes, who cares about that? Vega in Street Fighter. Are you kidding? And it was like, And I've been many times when I travel internationally, I've learned I always carry Vega pictures now in my carry-on. Because if I get stopped, and I have been, because I fit, I'm dark, whatever, they profile me, I pull out one of those Vega shots, I go, "Hey, I'm a villain only in my movies," and I show the Vega shot as a joke. You got to see the reaction of the custom people. It's hilarious. Because the moment I sign one for one, all the other friends run. They go, what about me? Come on. That's why I carry a stack. It's hilarious. No matter where I'm in the world. And what shocks me is people who recognize me. Like people like yourself who know the movie, who've watched it, they've memorized my head and face and stuff. And I haven't changed that much throughout these years. So people who know Vega, when they see my silhouette, even in the dark, I've had people sometimes come up to me and goes, "Are you?" And I'm shocked. Like I was in Turkey a couple of years ago. A young girl who, there's no way she wasn't even born when I did Street Fighter. In her 20s, came up to me in front of my friends and they were shocked. He goes, "Sir, are you," she didn't know how to even say, she goes, "Are you the one with the blades in the hand?" So I wanted to test her. I said, "No, I'm not Wolverine." She goes, "No, not Wolverine, not Wolverine." I want to test her. I said, "So who's got blades on his hand?" And she was like, in the fighting game or whatever. I said, "You mean Street Fighter?" I was teasing her. She goes, "Yeah." I said, "You mean Vega?" I was like, literally dragged it out. And she goes, "Yes, is that you?" And I went, "Yes, it's me." You should see her little face. So those are the moments. Yes, I still treasure it. I still enjoy it. And I realize it's like Kim Basinger. She went on to win the Oscar, but whenever she comes on a stage or whatever, they still play the Bond music. She will always be the Bond girl. So I've accepted, no matter what, I am always going to be part of Street Fighter legacy. And in some ways, I don't mind it. I've become like people like yourself find the Street Fighters that want to interview. And I'm always one of the first on the list because I have tremendous knowledge of the game, and I've stayed with the franchise throughout these 30 years. A lot of Street Fighter actors have moved on, and like Ming-Na Wen, who's done really well, and even Byron, they're not as involved with the Street Fighter stuff. But I've been in the Street Fighter community, and I had no choice. Vega was in demand, and I haven't still gone to any Capcom's, Comic-Con and stuff to sign autographs.
Conventions,
But I'm invited every year, to go and meet your fans. But I think I might do it now because now, as the 30th year is approaching, I can imagine how many fans the series will have.
Oh yeah, well that's great, Jay, and that's so good to hear that you still hold on to this in your own way. Because as you mentioned, some actors go on, it's just a job for them and they keep going on and on. But I feel like you really appreciate the fandom that comes with it, the responsibility it came with playing a character like Vega. It's very good to hear that you understand that this movie holds a very special place in a lot of people's hearts, and I respect you a lot for that. Yeah.
And I love the fact that like someone like yourself, who I have never met you besides today, has such love and admiration for me, and vice versa. Now that I met you, you were such a great guy, great show. So that instant love is there. And I feel like that in itself is magic. How can you not appreciate that in a world where there's so much chaos and conflict? What an ability to be able, someone looks at you, go, "You were Vega," and instantly they smile, or it takes them. I mean, I meet grown ass men now, they're in their 40s and 50s, and when they realize I'm Vega, they're transported to their childhood, and the excitement I see in them, they go, "What? No way. What? Get out of here." It's hilarious. And I love that element of it, that I can take them back to a moment. In fact, I just worked with a director, no joke, that when he was 12 years old, he was laying on his living room floor like this, watching Vega with his father. He confessed to me that one of the reasons he wanted to meet me and work with me was because he watched Street Fighter, just like yourself, 1,000 times when he was 12 years old. And now he's directing me in a movie. Imagine what that meant to him. So I was like, those stories, you cannot just let it go. It's like you said, the responsibility and realization of how sweet and what a privilege it is for me. And I need to like I was friends with Stallone for many years as well, and he's handled the Rocky Rambo franchise the same way, whereas he's always maintained that persona and stayed in touch with his original characters that got him there and became part of pop cult classics. In fact, he just redid Rocky 4. He re-edited it, which was very interesting. So yeah, it's those are the wonderful parts of our business.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hey, as you wrap up with the great Jay Tavare, it is now time for a segment I call the final act. Jay, I'm going to ask you 10 rapid fire questions about your likes, your dislikes, but here's the catch. I'm going to give you 1 minute to try to get through them. You up for it?
Let's do it.
Movies or TV shows?
Movies.
Theater or watch at home?
Watch at home.
Favorite movie?
Close Encounter of the Third Kind.
Favorite TV show?
Kung Fu.
Favorite trilogy?
Matrix.
One sequel better than the original?
Godfather.
Summer or fall?
Summer.
Would you have dyed your hair blonde if asked for a Street Fighter?
I was asked and I said no.
Lastly, describe Vega in one word.
Flamboyant, dynamic, in one word, flash.
All right, bam. Jay, you killed it at that. And we're going to time out there for a second. So let's talk about that little blonde, the blonde hair gate thing that everyone talks about online.
When I started the movie, because my hair was long, but they wanted to put a piece in my hair to make it even longer. And Vega was blonde originally, then became a redhead, then became a brunette. And I fought. I was saying, look, I'm representing all the Latinos. You show me a Latino in LA. I mean, we have blonde Latinos. I said, they're going to be mad. I'm playing a Spaniard and I'm going to be blonde. So they actually added some highlights. If you look closely within my hair, there was like some reddish highlights. That was the compromise we went for because my hair was jet black at the time. And, but on hindsight, maybe I should have gone blonde. It would have been a completely different Vega, but it might have opened up an entirely different, because I would have been less ethnic, and in Hollywood that matters, color of your hair and stuff like that. It might have been would have given a different perception of me. Sometimes you have to think of that, but I think I was true to what Vega was about, which was he was a Spaniard, he was a matador, and I've never seen a blonde matador in my life. So that's what I fought for. I said, look, you show me a Spaniard. I mean, we have them, but it's rare. So I said, I fought for that in that sense. Even for the way he looked, I fought for it. It's probably why I wasn't so popular with our production team, because they were looking as Vega more like Siegfried and Roy, flamboyant, a little feminine. Because in the game, he's a little like effeminate almost. He goes, he makes some funny sounds. But I wanted to play him more of a matador that is the badass, not the goofy side of Vega. Even the mask that you see here, originally they had given me a plastic mask, and I fought for this. And in Thailand, they brought a real metal worker to me, and I made the guy look at the pictures. He said, "What do you want?" He always spoke English. I said, "Look at my face." I said, angular. The mask they'd given me was round and it was plastic. I went, no, Vega's mask, angular. And look, even the inside has the imprint of my face. So I had to do a full print where the mask was able to go perfectly on my face, If I can get it over my head now, So,
nice.
So it was supposed to fit exactly the way, so like stay on. So all of those little details I was involved with. I wanted like the things. In fact, look, this is also, I kept certain memorabilia. This was the tip of his hair.
No way, nice.
Ponytail, right on the tip, which you see here on this. This was this is like one of 300, 270 something statue, Vega, this one. And it's all magnetic. You can change the head, you can take the arms off. So it was But yeah, as you can see, Vega is always like that mask is actually up there on my wall, and it is firmly part of, and I always think of theater as wearing a mask, because whether you actually wear a mask or not, you're putting a mask on to become the character.
That's true.
It's a very symbolic way of he was just such a theatrical guy. That's what he was. Vega was theater. He was theater from the moment he arrived, handing the roses, to the way he wanted to finish the fight in a stylish way. It was all about theater. And that's what that's what I thought the character. I thought flamboyant, theatrical, warrior.
Well, Jay, good for you for standing up for what you believe in and for making Vega your own. I love that. I truly do. And thank you so much for being a guest on the show today. Thank you
My
for your
pleasure.
contributions to the creative arts. And Street Fighter is one of my all-time favorite movies. And you play a big part in creating that love that I have for that film. And more importantly, the bond that I shared with my brothers growing up watching this movie. We would all have our favorites, and you were always my favorite. And so I thank you for making such a great character come to life. I truly wish you the best in all your upcoming projects. And I look forward to having you back on to show to discuss the next one.
Absolutely. And if you want to follow me, I'm on Instagram under Jay Tavare. Just if you want to follow me, anybody. Thank you so much, guys.
Jay Tavare.